So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about how to calculate some common descriptive statistics in Excel. And we're going to start with the average because in statistics, we call it the mean, of course, but in Excel, this was not originally designed for statisticians. And so they call it the average because that is sort of more commonplace. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can find the average formula in Excel. So one way is to go to the formulas tab, and then there's a bunch of statistical formulas under more functions and then in the statistical library. And so you can see right here, averages here. And this will actually give you a complete list of all the functions that are available to you. So that is one way of finding the average function. Another way, of course, is simply to start typing average and then put in the numbers that you want to average. On the other hand, another way, and that I find, especially if I haven't used the formula before, is to go into this FX option and to find the average or the whatever function that I'm looking for this way. And one of the reasons that looking for the function, if I'm not familiar with it, through this option, through the search bar, is really helpful, is because it will give you a lot of information about functions and their syntax. So if the function is very complex, then it will tell you what elements have to go in the syntax, which ones are required, which ones are optional, and specifically what they mean. Now, the average function doesn't have much going on for it. You just have to put in a list of numbers, and then it will calculate the average. But other formulas might be more complex. When we talk about the quartiles, for instance, we'll have to specify the quartile, what quartile we're talking about. So I'm going to use this just to illustrate. Now, when you click on FX, it automatically defaults to a list of common functions. But if you're looking for something in particular, then you can type in, maybe you don't know it's the average in Excel, type in the statistical name mean and you hit OK, hit go. And what it will do is actually come up with a bunch of formulas that involve different ways of calculating the mean. So we've got the geometric mean, the harmonic mean, the trimmed mean, the average, and a bunch of others that might involve means. Now, in their description someplace. Now we just want the average. We want the default calculation of the mean. But again, if you're not sure what it's called in Excel, or you're not sure what kind of mean that you might be trying to calculate, then going through the search for the function can give you a lot of options, but it will reduce it. It's not the big full statistical list of every possible formula out there. These ones specifically involve means. Now, when I hit OK, then it's going to give me a format. And it's basically going to say, like, I need to know what am I calculating the mean of. Now, I have some data set of square footage for some different houses. And so what I can do is I can click this arrow, and then I'm going to highlight all my values. 148 of them, and then I can hit OK. Now, when you're using a range of values, Excel will put a colon from the start to the end. You can also just put in a string of numbers separated by commas. Hit OK, and it calculates my average for me. And then, of course, good Excel format is to label everything so that I know what it is without clicking on the formula. Well, the average is, of course, not the only statistical descriptive statistic that we might want. Maybe we want the median, or maybe we want the mode. These also have formulas in them. And again, you can search for them if you're not sure what their names are. But I know that the median is just the median. And if I just want to calculate on the whole column, regardless of what's in the column, I can just type the name of the column, A to A. And the fact that square feet is a word is going to mean that Excel is not going to calculate the median of that value. And I can see here that the mean and the median are somewhat similar. So that's good. Now the mode, if I start typing mode, there's actually multiple mode functions. The multi-mode will potentially output, if there's more than one mode, it will give you all of the modes. It has no limit on how many. But there has to be, if everybody is only used once, then they will say NA. The default old mode, I recommend not using. It's deprecated. Now mode.single, now this is going to only report one mode, and it's going to report usually the one that is numerically first. So I recommend, again, not doing that, mostly because if there are multiple modes, even if there's so many that you want to say eventually there's not really a mode, you wouldn't know that from using this function. You would have to be pretty sure there's only one. So I'm going to choose multi-mode, and then again my column. Now, the one thing you have to be careful about with the mode is that if there is more than one mode, as we have here, there's two of them, 1700 and 1650 are both used the same number of times more than anybody else. It will spill over into the next row. And so you want to leave space under the mode before you put in the next statistic, just in case it rolls over. And as I said, if there's no mode, everything is only used one time, then the cell will read NA. Now, so what are some other descriptive statistics we can do? So we could do the min and the max in order to calculate the range. So min, max, range. And you might not be terribly surprised to know that the min is the minimum min function. And the maximum is the max function. Oops, me bad typing. And then the range is just the difference between the two, the max minus the min. And so the range here, there's a range of 1,300 square feet from the smallest square footage at 1210 to the largest square footage in this list, which is 2510. We can also calculate things like the standard deviation. Now, like the mode, the standard deviation had an old version, and then there are some updated versions, STDEV. And again, most of these you can ignore. STDEV was the old default version. It's essentially equivalent to the STDEV.S. S for sample. Most of the time, our data is samples, it's not populations. So if you're not sure, I would use the .S. And then STDEV.P is the population version. So remember, the denominator in these two versions is different. And so you need to make sure that you're using the correct one. So .S, and then again, select your column. And then typically we round the standard deviation to 2 decimals more than the original data. So I'm going to make this. Now, maybe 1 would be better because none of these they all end in 0, but whatever. And then another one that we can calculate are the quartiles. And the quartiles also have their particular issues. The quartiles and the percentiles both have the same issue. There's sort of a typical way of calculating them, and then some people have their own little peculiar way of calculating them, whether you're including or excluding endpoints. And so that creates slightly different calculations. And so the quartiles have both versions. And again, if you just type quartile or search for them or find them in the reference, the quartile is the default. It's, again, the old version is essentially equivalent to quartile.inc. INC for inclusive. EXC is for exclusive. So that means it's excluding the endpoints. And this has to do with the way that you calculate the quartile, because the quartile, remember, it's the half of the bottom half. So you find the median, you divide your data set in two, and then you calculate the bottom half. The median of the bottom half is the first quartile. And the question is, in your procedure, if the median is a value in the data set, do you keep it in both halves or don't you? And so most people will use the inclusive method. And so I teach my students that they should do it this way. But there are textbooks out there that teach the exclusive approach. And so you should be conscious of what your particular textbook is doing, what the expectations of your group are. Okay, so quartile. So again, we highlight the whole data set, the whole range of values we want, and then we have to specify what quartile, because there's 5 quartiles. 0 is equivalent to the minimum. It's essentially 0/4 of the data. The first quartile, we would put a 1, 25th percentile, 1/4 of the data is below, 3/4 is above. The median is equivalent to the second quartile because that's 2/4 of the data below, 2/4 above. The 3 for the third quartile, and then if you put in 4, it will give you the maximum. 4/4 is below. So I'm going to go for the first quartile first. And we could do the third quartile the same way. Quartile, start typing, INC, A to A, comma 3. And a common statistic that is useful when building box plots by hand is the IQR. That is the middle 50% of the data. IQR stands for interquartile range. And that's just the difference between the third quarter and the first quartile. Now, these are some common statistics. There are obviously so many others that we could talk about, but you can calculate them each one at a time. At the very end of this video, I want to show you very briefly a way that you can get a lot of descriptive statistics quickly if you install the data analysis tool pack. Now, if you don't have the data analysis tool pack installed, you will probably need to go find a video on how to install it. But in a PC, typically you would go to options, and then you would select add-ins and select go on the Excel add-ins in order to add it. It is already installed in Excel. It's just you have to activate it. Once you have it activated, then it will appear here on your data tab for data analysis. And when you click on that, you will get a list of options. This data analysis tool pack has been around forever. And so it does some things that we no longer needed to do. But one of the things it does do is a nice set of descriptive statistics. And all of these things we can calculate ourselves one by one, but the descriptive statistics package will calculate it quickly. If you have another statistics package that you pay for, this one is free, but if you pay for one, it almost certainly also has a set of descriptive statistics. Here's my input range. Now, one thing, you can't use A to A. You can't just use the whole column. You have to actually highlight the data. It is grouped by columns. There is a label in the first row. I'm going to put it on my data set. Be careful not to put this way at the bottom of the page. And then you can select the summary statistics you wanted to display. And there are some options here. If you wanted to display maybe the 3 largest or the 4th largest, the 2 smallest, whatever, You can pick some things if you want to. It gives you information on confidence levels for things, which is further on in a typical statistics course. You can adjust the confidence level that you want, but I don't want that here since that's not really what we're doing. And then if I hit OK, then what it does is it makes a nice table. Here's our mean, which we calculated earlier. It's just by default displaying more decimal places, but that's fine. Standard error, something we'll learn further on in our course typically. Here's our median, which matches. That is one of the modes. Notice it's only one mode, so it's the first one that it found. Our standard deviation is the same. The variance is the square of the standard deviation that's also listed here. Kurtosis and scutus, we don't really cover those in an elementary statistics course. Here's our range, our min, and our max. It does not calculate the quartiles. That's not in the list. So if you're asked to calculate the 5-number summary, which is the min, the first quartile, the median, the third quartile, and the max, you will get 3 of those 5 numbers from this list, but you will have to calculate these 2 on your own. So again, feel free to poke around, go into the formulas and see what other descriptive statistics you can find in our list, because as I said, there are many, many more, but this will give you a start.